This episode of RSR is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Spectra 1964, and Grace Design. These are tools that I use every day in my studio, from the Spectra 1964, STX 600, 100, and 100D, and Native Instruments Complete 15, to Isotope Ozone and RX, and the central hub for my studio, the Grace Design M701 audio interface. Follow the sponsor links in the show notes. Grab my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com, and remember to like this video and subscribe on YouTube because it's a great way to help support this show. Now, get ready to rock.
Yeah, Leon was a huge part of the Wrecking Crew. He's not only featured in the film, but we know that he was on, hundreds and hundreds of recordings. If you ever get a chance to see his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you hear Elton John just listing off all of the albums that he recorded on, from, being part of the Tijuana Brass to Badfinger to Frank Sinatra to Beach Boys, him playing. And again, he was on so many albums. I love listening to Cher talk about, Leon Russell during the Wrecking Crew years. And of course, Glenn Campbell was a part of that as well. And he and Glenn were such good friends.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Rockstars, if you want fresh song ideas, Complete 15 from Native Instruments has the tools to kickstart your creativity. With Contact 8's Chords tool, you can generate and customize chord progressions instantly for songwriting. And the Phrases tool gives you ready-to-go melodic inspiration right at your fingertips. With 165 instruments and over 150,000 sounds, Complete 15 helps you turn blank pages into music. Pair that with a Complete Control keyboard or machine hardware for seamless integration and hands-on control. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Teresa Knox, an entrepreneur and preservationist from Tulsa, Oklahoma, whose work bridges education, entertainment, real estate, and cultural heritage. Guided by a belief in sustainable models that serve the community, she has revitalized several historic landmarks, most notably the Church Studio and Harweldon Mansion, both listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Church Studio, originally founded by legendary musician Leon Russell in 1972, became a creative hub for artists like Tom Petty, J.J. Cale, and Eric Clapton, and under Teresa's leadership, it has been meticulously restored and reimagined as a nonprofit recording studio, audio engineering school, event space, museum, and tourist destination. Once again, connecting artists, students, and music lovers in a vibrant community of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Teresa also developed Tulsa's Studio Row district, home to numerous creative and commercial tenants, further strengthening the city's artistic and entrepreneurial landscape. Her book, Sanctuary of Sound, right here behind me, tells the story of the church's studio transformation from a sacred space into a legendary landmark, a testament to vision, revival, and the enduring power of music. This is a beautiful book, so I'm excited to talk about this. A big thank you to Nancy Ruth for making our introduction. Please welcome Teresa Knox to Recording Studio Rockstars. Teresa, my friend, are you ready to rock?
I am. Hey, so excited excited to be here today.
It's very nice to meet you. What an amazing story to learn about this. Now, of course, I knew who Leon Russell was, but I learned so much more just browsing through the book and doing research to get ready for this. And it's really fascinating. I'll be honest, I just didn't know about the Tulsa, Oklahoma music scene. So it's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Give
you.
us a little bit of an overview, story arc in your own words about who you are and an introduction and how you got interested in music and ultimately, have created this incredible resource in Tulsa.
Sure. So, well, first and foremost, I was born in Tulsa, came from a big family. I had 7 older siblings, and they just love music. And of course, Leon Russell, being from Oklahoma and growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, he was always a topic of conversation. So, at a really young age, I started collecting music memorabilia. So, my first item I collected, I was 8 years old, and just between garage sales and thrift stores and getting stuff from friends and family, I just started collecting and had thousands of pieces before I even acquired this building, the church studio. And so it was just, I don't know, I was really proud of all the artists that came from my hometown of Tulsa, like Leon Russell, like J.J. Kell. I was kind of enamored by Leon's record label as well, which is Shelter Records. And so I had a lot of items pertaining to Shelter Records, that short-lived record label from 72 to 76. And I don't know, it kind of became an obsession. I didn't know Leon. I did see him in concert several times, but the collection is very, very heavy, Leon Russell. And of course, I didn't work in the entertainment industry or recording studio or anything pertaining to music. But it's something that I always kept dear to my heart and love to brag about all the artists. In addition to Leon and J.J. Kell, of course, Jim Keltner is from here, Dwight Twilley, so many others. David Gates of Bread, if you're a soft rock fan, which I am. I love David Gates, and just so many other artists that went on. The Gap Band went on either as session players, working with other bands, or their own stardom.
Now, was the Gap Band also from Tulsa?
Yes, the Gap Band, they were Leon's backing band. They recorded their first album here at the church studio, the Wilson Brothers. GAP is an acronym for Greenwood, Archer, and Pine, which are 3 streets here in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
All right. I have to say this. Girl, you just dropped a bomb on me. I had no idea that the Gap Band was from Tulsa. Wow, what a trip. I mean, I remember growing up in Massachusetts, and my neighborhood buddy, Jeff Jones, came over and he was like, check this out. And he puts the jam box down in the middle of the street, presses play, and out comes the Gap Band. And I was just like, what a sound,
They are so good. And they really are part of what we call the Tulsa Sound, even though it's a little different than Leon's style or JJ's laid back style. I mean, they're a part of our, musical legacy.
Yeah, I mean, it's what a great crossover, too, Leon is doing that kind of soul blues, makes me think of Dr. John in New Orleans, too. There's sort of some parallels in sound. And then the Gap Band is just that, I think of it as almost an urban sound, an urban funk sound.
Yeah,
cool
definitely.
Way.
Right. And Dr. John was here in the 70s and recorded. And one thing I learned recently is, the character on the Muppets, what was his name with the top hat? That was kind of a hybrid inspiration between Dr.
Fuzzy
John.
Bear or something like that?
No. It's, gosh.
Or Fozzie Bear, was that the piano guy?
Yes, but I don't think it was him. But anyway, it was a combination of Dr. John and Leon Russell. So
yeah.
Love that. Yes.
Yeah, that's a trip. Well, so tell us a little bit about what's if somebody's never been to Oklahoma, what is Oklahoma like? What's Tulsa like? What part of the world are we talking about? Just for those who are listening.
Tulsa is amazing. Again, I'm a native Tulsan. Of course, I cannot compare it to any other place because this is where I've always lived. But we're built on a river, the Arkansas River, and we are the capital of Route 66. And so we have that designated designation of being the capital. And of course, 2026 is the 100th anniversary of the Mother Road. So we get a lot of tourists through our city. Of course, people kind of consider us drive-through or a flyover state, but those that know, this is such a great place. And tourism is our third biggest industry, right under, of course, oil and gas is number one. Number two is aviation. American Airlines, their biggest hub, maintenance hub is here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But we just have a beautiful heritage. We are a new state, newish compared to others. We're the 46th state, built in 1907. And so the oil barons in particular built the city of Tulsa. But, Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, this was their home city at the historic Haynes Ballroom. But we are a music city. We have live music 7 days a week. We have legacy landmarks, historic landmarks where music is performed. And we have new venues such as the BOK Center, which is an award-winning arena. We just had Paul McCartney here. Within 48 hours, we had Bono and The Edge and Paul McCartney. And I had an opportunity to meet both of them. We hosted them, and that was really, really cool. But a lot of world tours start in Tulsa. But it's just, people are friendly. We have a lot of lakes. We're near the Ozarks, so we have hills, and it's very green here. We call this area of Oklahoma green country. So it's just a really great place to live, work, play, and enjoy music.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I was sort of fascinated to discover that Tulsa was that one of the first big oil fields ever to be discovered at that time too?
Yes. The very first one was in a town called Glenpool, Oklahoma, and it was Glenpool. And yes, everyone was here from J. Paul Getty to Skelly to E.P. Harwell to the Phillips family. So this was home to all of them. And we have beautiful mansions, beautiful architecture here, including one of the top Art Deco building collections in the world. People come from all over to see the Art Deco.
That's wild. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask too. I imagined that, I wanted to ask if, similar to a place like Detroit, if it's still a very active oil industry, then perhaps it never had the lull that Detroit did. But Detroit is a place with beautiful architecture, and I wondered if that was going to be one of my questions, was whether Tulsa was like that with these gorgeous buildings and houses and.
Yes. In the 1920s, we were considered the oil capital of the world and got the name Magic City. Of course, the more oil was produced, the more money was produced, and, magic happens with those types of resources.
Now, Tulsa's history is not all rosy, though. Is that correct? Were there also some issues, race issues and things like that in the past?
Well, in 1921, there was what we call the race massacre. And it happened in a short period of time, over 24 hours. But there's an area in Tulsa, in the Greenwood area, where the Gap Band grew up and where their dad's church was located. And many blocks were burned down, and very similar to what was happening across the country. The good thing about Tulsans, everyone rallied around that. They rebuilt. But it's something that we talk about. We have a museum that talks about that heritage and that legacy. We're not proud of that, but we're proud of the fact of how we recognize it today and what the citizens did to reconcile that situation.
Yeah, indeed. There's a quote that has come up in my world recently that I think sort of applies to this too. It's from the 13th century poet Rumi, who says that the wound is where the light enters us, So I think about how even in a cultural setting, a place where there could be great difficulty in the past can also be an incredible opportunity for people to bring in the light and bring in the heartfelt creative contributions in the community and rebuild into something really beautiful, which sounds like that's exactly what's happened there. Now, when was the church founded? Because that has quite a history as well.
It has an amazing history. It really grew up with the state of Oklahoma. So We did become a state in 1907, and the church as we know it today was finished in 1915. It was Grace Methodist Episcopal Church. We did become friends with the great-grandson of the original pastor, and it was an integrated church. So this was pre-race massacre that both blacks and whites attended this church, but they had music from the very beginning. And this church is very different than the very elaborate, more fancy churches that we have in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma. We are located just east of downtown on the other side of the tracks. And we discovered that the people, the working class people, most of them worked for the oil barons, built this church. And this building did not have documented history before. So the more I learned, the more I researched. I went to the Methodist archive. I've interviewed hundreds of people, not only about Leon Russell and Shelter Records and the artists that recorded here in the 70s, but what happened after the turn of the century. So it was really very rewarding and very satisfying, piecing that history together, which is really what inspired me to document this in book format, because I'm not always going to be around, and I'd learned so much of it just, was up here, and I felt like I needed to get that documented. But it was really neat, and during the renovation, we found a lot of items that had slipped through the cracks that really told early story.
I bet. That's amazing. Yeah. Now the first part of the book talks about, and I'll show this once again. I'll bring it back on camera, rock stars. So it's beautiful. How many pages is it again? It's quite a history of the building, and then also Leon Russell and Shelter Records, and then what you guys have done with
pages.
The studio now.
Yeah, and it's 12 by 12. It's the size of a vinyl record album, and it weighs 6.5 pounds. Someone weighed it for me. I would not have thought to do that, but yes, chapter 1 is called "Birth of a Sanctuary," and it's all about the early church, the early pioneers that built this. I feature some of the wood species. There are 11 wood species because the people of the church built this. They were fed chicken dinners to bring in their scrap wood and bring in their labor to help finish this really magnificent structure.
And then that was one of the questions I had. Is so apparently with the building, the original construction, or just the building of the church, there's like quite a variety of wood in the actual construction, right?
Right. So I, walking through, I was really taken by all of the different types, oak, red oak and white oak. There's maple. There's a lot of pine throughout the entire property. There's mahogany. There's fir. The fir is just gorgeous. Really all of the wood species. And of course, our own Leon Russell in 1972 brought in Oklahoma cedar. A lot of cedar trees in our state. And of course, in the 70s, even in California, a lot of the 70s studios use cedar because that wood is just so lovely from an acoustic perspective. Even though he didn't know. Nice. Yes, it smells so wonderful when we were cleaning it up, and it's just wonderful. And so it's very beautiful.
That's great. And then you were talking about finding old things, so you can see the old cornerstone of the building when it was constructed. And then I believe right here, I don't know if this will show so much on the camera, but it's an old piece of paper, or it's an old flyer called The Watchword.
Yes. So we found pamphlets, we found hymnals, we found a cookbook. We found just lots of different things. Of course, the building was pretty dilapidated when I acquired it, and you can see that little critters had been chewing on some things, but we got our photographer I set those out, and he photographed them just the way we found them. Again, they're just part of the provenance of the building, and they tell a story, and it's just amazing looking at some of those dates, 1916, 1918, 1923, these different documents that they have not seen the light of day all of these years, over 100 years. And so that was just, I don't know, it was like I was very hands-on during the construction, and the guys would be, the work. We had over 300 contractors and subcontractors working
Wow.
on this project, and they would get excited to say, "Guess what we found today?" Or, so it was really neat.
It sounds like you had a pretty big vision for doing this. There was also a fascinating story of you. I heard you telling a story about discovering the building and then trying to find out who owned it and acquiring it. Can you tell us a little bit of that? Because it really shows a tenacity on your part.
Sure. So I was renovating another historic property pretty close, just a few miles from the church studio. And so found myself driving by the church, something I hadn't thought about in a long time. And my older brother, Larry, and I were talking about it. And I was just really taken aback by the shape that it was in. The windows were boarded up. There was a lot of trash in the area. It just looked really bad. And I was in this renovation mode. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be neat to have this building? And my kids were getting older. And of course, they had zero interest in some of the things that I had been collecting. A little interest, but not enough to take it on. And I thought, wow, that'd be a great building to put some of these artifacts and memorabilia that I'd collected over the years since I was a kid. So I went on the county tax records. I found the owner's name and address, and I just hand wrote him a letter. And I told him I'm a huge Leon Russell fan. Would he ever consider selling the building? And a few days later, he called me and he said, "The building's not for sale, but I'd love to meet with you. I'm also a Leon Russell fan." So
Didn't he have you meet him in a pub or something at a bar
it's a
down
pub.
the street?
It's a pub down the street from the church studio, and so we were there talking music and drinking, and so finally he said he would be willing to sell it to me, but he wouldn't show me the property. So we came up with a little napkin deal, and I went to the title and abstract company where we did the closing. And then after I owned it, I walked in the building for the first time.
Amazing. So sight unseen. Rock stars, if you want your mixes and masters to translate everywhere, Isotope Ozone 12 gives you the tools to finish with confidence. The new bass control helps you see and balance your low end and punch. Unlimiter brings back life to overcompressed tracks, and Stem EQ lets you rebalance vocals, drums, or bass using only the stereo mix file. And when it's time to get loud, Ozone's new IRC Maximizer gives powerful, clean masters without distortion. Go to isotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Now, you of course have come to something like this with some experience in real estate and things like that. What advice would you have for those of us who might come at it from a music recording background, and yet we see a building, we think, boy, I wonder if that would make a cool studio for me one day. What tip would you share on approaching it like that?
Well, that is such a great question. I didn't go in originally because I don't come from, your background. So I didn't think, oh, this is going to make just such a killer recording studio. I was thinking more of like, what can we do to have more of a positive reflection on Leon Russell's legacy? And then it took a life of its own. But you know what? I've always started business, with gut and intuition. As I've gotten older, I've been more calculated. I try to be more strategic. But honestly, everything that I'd learned in business was just out the door with this. I just had these, rose-colored glasses on, and I just became obsessed with this building, and it took a life of its own. So it's hard to give advice, because if I could go back, would I do it any differently? I think there's some things that I could do that would have saved a lot of money. And again, not knowing anything about the recording industry, as you know, you don't need a studio like ours to record great music, we went all in on analog, even though we
Yeah.
have the latest of digital capture as well. And I did visit many studios across the country, from most of the studios in Nashville, Blackbird and others, to Sunset Sound and other studios in California, New York, Austin, Kansas City. And,
Did you make it to Muscle Shoals also?
you know what? I didn't make it to Muscle Shoals, but I've become very, very close friends with them. And I was in the area and I didn't get a chance to go in, but I'm very familiar with their model. I've met with the management team. They've been here to the studio, and I'm not saying they've prioritized tourism over recording, but that's kind of the model that they do. They record overnight. And
well, I think it's just such a smart way to combine. I mean, because we want to keep the music culture and the studio culture alive as well. And, it's such a smart way to combine efforts to really make something thrive where there might be challenges in just one or the other.
Right. No, right after I bought this, I did. You talked about Detroit. I went to Third Man Records, saw the pressing plant that Jack White has, and then I stopped at Motown. And I love, love, love Motown music, but there's a part of me that was the moment that I thought, I have to bring the church studio back to being a recording studio. It was the horrible business model in a way, because of the viable alternative and substitute products from a pure financial perspective. And I wasn't looking at the project that way. And you can make money in studios, but there was a lot of discouragement, from studio owners that I met with. But at Motown, I mean, it's so cool, and they're investing millions of dollars right now in an expansion, but it's like just hanging things on the wall and almost like living in the past. I didn't want that. It's like, how can we honor the past, learn by it, really lean into good sound recording from an analog perspective, from a gear perspective, from an acoustics perspective, but be relevant to today's artist, and develop programming that really elevates good sound recording, especially in this digital and AI age that we live in.
Right, indeed. All right, so I've been holding this page. I found the one with the images of all the beautiful woods that you find all through the studio, which is really cool. I love that.
Yes, all different. And, they just wanted to finish the building and, again, get their chicken dinner. And they were playing music. And again, I don't think it's anything that anyone noticed in the past, because I talked to people, then they were just really shocked. But it's just something that I noticed. But again, coming at it from a non-recording perspective.
Yeah, you've got an eye for design, I'm sure, with real estate. Now, I bet you must have learned a ton about recording through this whole process. You guys, so I've got a couple other pictures I'd love to show. One is what the studio looked like in 1972, and another is what the studio looks like today, I believe. But maybe I'll find those. If you want to just talk a little bit about your introduction to the studio side of, engineering and what goes into a studio, because you came at it from a lover of music, it sounds like, and a collector of the memorabilia and a fan of Leon Russell, who Rockstars is right behind Teresa on the wall there. That's such a great drawing.
Yeah, it's a P.S. Gordon painting of Leon. Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know if you would call me an audiophile, but, I have thousands of vinyl records. I try to get those vinyl records that come from original master recordings, because we've all listened to those vinyl records that were made from compressed recordings that were meant for MP3 or a CD or something. But yeah, I just did a deep dive. I started reading everything I could about the recording process, recording studios, the business model. But since I love analog recording and listening to music, I even have 2 reel-to-reels in my house.
Cool.
I knew I wanted to, go in from an analog perspective. And
so you feel like you already trained your ear a little bit on what sounds good.
Yeah, I think so. Never tested myself or anything like that, but
yeah, there is no test. There's just the experience and the personal knowledge, really,
Right. It's like, a recent example, someone gave me an ELO record from Urban Outfitters, which is a cute store. And then I have the original. And you listen to those two side by side, there is literally no comparison. The original, you're in the room with them. And, I have a little listening room in my house and you listen to that second one, it's like you can't even hear all the instrumentation. And
Wow.
so, that's just a elementary
And that was
example.
that was just you comparing two vinyl copies of the same
Yes.
album?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's
Yeah.
so cool to hear.
Yeah, you have to look at the linear notes to see where they got that. And there's a really cool pressing plant in Salina, Kansas, and Quality Records, I think is the name of it. But almost all of his pressings, he's very, very, very particular. They're almost always from the original tapes. And
yeah.
you can really tell a difference of those, which is really, really cool. But and so I started interviewing studio owners, not really a formal interview, but, what's the pros and cons of, in an age of disruption in recording where you can literally record on your phone. And, most studio owners, they love music, they do passion projects, and they want to help the musician, they're there to serve. And I really love that about the industry. But it's discouraging too. They talk about sometimes it's very difficult to pay your bills. And, where artists are making less and less money, they want to be fair on charging them. But like our fees today are very similar to what they were charging in the 1970s. We have an advertisement that Leon Russell put in the paper, even though the studio was primarily for himself and his friends. They did open the studio up to the public, and it's the exact price in 73, 74 as what we charge today. And it's like it's one of those industries that has not appreciated the way every dentist or legal fees or everything has gone up, but not recording studio time or even what musicians make at venues and clubs. And so that's why everyone is being very, very creative on how to generate income. And I don't think studios are any different. I did talk to studios because I have more of a marketing background, posting and our social media strategy, building our digital DNA at the same time as we're building the brick and mortar. And some look down upon that a little bit because it's like, well, if you know about our studio, or, being very confidential on who's recording. And we are too. I mean, we sign NDAs. We have people that record that we never share, and maybe until the music comes out. But those that don't care, we're in a content curation world. And so that's been my strategy from the beginning. This logo we have, I sketched it the day after I bought the studio. I had a little bit of buyer's remorse because I did not realize, I knew it was in bad shape, but the water that had infiltrated and the needles, and I mean, it was just a mess.
You had your work cut out for you.
Yeah. So, like a lot of projects, you have to begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey quote. But I sketched this and then got our social handles, our website, started posting. That was 9.5 years ago. And I've never, ever, ever skipped one day posting.
That's amazing. You have to begin with the end in mind. What a great bit of advice for us whether we're making a record or whether we're building a studio.
Yes, you have to kind of dream like what the end product could be like. And I'm a big dreamer like that. Yes, it was discouraging, and the budget went so I didn't have a budget really. I just started doing it, and then I just had zero control. I think part of that was, we're a church, a house of worship, a very spiritual ground that we sit on, and then my obsession with Leon Russell, and then just knowing how important this project is, and I don't know, it just took off.
So cool. So cool. Well, let me see here. I think I have some shots of the studio from the 1970s. You tell me if you can see these okay on the camera. You kind of get an idea.
Those are really great.
That's the old control room there. Do you know anything about the old mixing console and what they had in the control room? Because there's a lot of cool looking gear.
Yeah, they had a Trident. Leon was such a gearhead, so he had a lot of different consoles over the years. He had a Trident, then he had an API. We have a Neve 8068,
That's amazing.
but yeah, he had a 40-track Stevens machine. He had two of them actually, and then
Wow,
he
were they
had.
doing two? Would they sync up two machines and actually do 80-track recordings, or they would maybe
I
do
think
one and
so.
bounce over to another or something like that?
I don't know exactly, but I think so. And
Yeah,
he had an Impex tape machine, which we have one of those. He had a Studer. We have a Studer.
great.
A lot of people ask, was this equipment in the building? Well, there have been 5 owners between Leon Russell and myself. And there was no gear or anything left over from Leon, of course. So we just had a wish list, got that I did hire a studio consultant, Chad Haley out of Nashville, brilliant. He worked for Audie Ashworth in Nashville, and J.J. Kell was one of his mentors. So he started working with J.J. Kell at the age of 17. So he was introduced to me by drummer Jamie Oldacre, Eric Clapton, Peter Frampton drummer, and the Tractors. And he's from Tulsa as well. And he said, you got to meet this guy. And Chad was so old school. He had built Neil Young's studio in Broken Arrow in the Redwood Forest. In California, but his ears were really tuned to Tulsa, JJ, Leon, and he had a passion for that old school recording. I say old school, it's relevant today. What is old is new again, right?
Right,
But
right.
I just fell in love with him. He's very meticulous. I mean, his wire, we brought in 26 miles of wire to the building, but
Wow.
it's just, it's like an art form when you look at his work.
Yeah.
And so.
Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. I think there was a photo of it in here. We would call it looming the patch bay.
Okay.
So that was back when I was doing wiring in the beginning too. But
the
so careful
you can relate to that.
The careful soldering that goes into connecting all the cables and then making it all look neat and beautiful and tied together behind.
Stunning.
Because once you start putting in wires and then more wires and then more wires, it just becomes, it would become a crazy mess if you didn't keep it all super organized.
Right. And he had custom labels, either etched, screen printed with our name on it and his name as well. And it's just, any of your listeners and we would absolutely love to show you. So if anyone's ever near Tulsa, Oklahoma, I'd love to give you the behind the scenes tour.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, so you were working with an architect, but also a studio designer, or that was one and the same? And then when it comes to wiring, that's somebody who specializes in that separately?
Yeah. So I used a local architect. His name is Chris Lilly. And, I needed him for a number of reasons. But then after I identified him, I connected with Chad from a studio design perspective. And then I connected with Steve Durr, who is
Steve's
also
so great.
Yeah. If you know Steve, he's also in Nashville. So from a sound, from our monitors. And so he worked very, very closely with Chad. And they would, come in for weeks at a time. And then Steve, from an acoustic perspective, especially towards the end, the renovation took over 6 years. It was an intense, very long, part of it because of the shape the building was in. Part of it is during that time, we got listed on the National Register of Historic Places. But, when you're trying to retrofit, make things sound good. So Steve was so particular.
Yeah.
on those things. So I really appreciate him flying in,
And
on a
he
regular
knows.
basis.
He knows
And
when
he
it
knows.
sounds
Oh, he's
right.
brilliant. Oh, he's brilliant. And
I
he's
saw
so
that the monitors were listed in the book as Durr monitors, and I was like, "Ooh, I
Mhm.
wonder if that's Steve." So that was cool to
Yeah,
hear.
absolutely. And then, of course, yeah, so, those were the kind of the trifecta of the renovation, the local architect, Steve Durr and Chris Lilly. And then, we had, custom acoustic panels made with a really great guy who knows Steve, and he does a lot of great celebrity studios. And so we had a really great team.
Yeah, you're making me feel a lot better about the fact that it took me 2 years to put my studio together. It's just a home studio. I
Yes,
didn't have to rebuild it.
it was so much, but
Yeah,
it
but
was
it's so
totally
worth it
worth it.
because when it's done, yeah, it's just so exciting when everything gets open. And I'm sure you know this from experience, but a good tip for us rock stars is the moment you're ready, take all your photos right away. That's when you take the photos, right? Right when everything's just been finished.
Yes, that's so funny you say that. Yes, we have a few, but yes, the sooner you can get that, the better because everything is so pristine and gorgeous and
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, you said you're now booked 7 days a week. So you guys are just busy all the time.
We're
I think even for
busy.
the interview, you had to find a corner in the one of the extra rooms at the studio.
Yes. And, unlike like Blackbird or a studio with multiple tracking rooms, we have one live room and a control
Yeah.
room. And so, yeah, I was surprised we would be as busy as we are, but we have served nearly 1,500 musicians the past 12 months alone. And so we do have an artist grant program. So our Oklahoma artists can apply for that and record at no charge. We
Amazing.
really try to do our part for, setting musicians up for success. But I didn't realize that we would blow up as a tourist attraction as well. And honestly, that scared the hell out of me because we invested so much in our microphone collection, our gear. I mean, we invested significantly to make it such a great recording and safe and comfortable space, a really great vibe, as the musicians say. But how can we do that while tourists are lurking around and looking at the archive and the collection and the exhibits? But it's just brilliant. The live room is a floating floor, so there's no transfer of sound. So we have all of our activities. We have a bar, so we have some really great cocktails and local beers, and so people come in. We have our own coffee called the Wrecking Brew,
Oh,
that's
that's
roasted
great.
here. We have our own beans delivered regularly. So,
Were you shocked to discover that nobody had taken the term "the wrecking brew" yet?
yes, I was like, that's crazy. I know I need
Did you
to.
come up with that one? Was that yours?
Actually, our receptionist did.
Oh,
So we're
amazing.
like, we need a good, coffee name. And her name is Rana. And I was like, oh, when you know, she said it. I was like, holy shit, that's the name
That's great.
that we need to have. And it's very, very popular and it's
Shout
very,
out to
very
you, Rana. That's a
delicious.
brilliant one right
Yes.
there. So
Yeah.
let me see here. Here is a shot of the control room as it looks now, Rockstars. Let me know. Here, I'll even step up and lean over toward the camera.
Great. Yeah.
See that?
That's a
That's beautiful with
That's a good. We have those Yamaha NS10s there. We also have some ATCs that we use as midfield once in a while, but the guys aren't crazy about them because the Durr monitors sound so good. And of
yeah.
course, people want to, after they're recording, even, with the rough mix, what does the sound on their phone and their car, blah, 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 all of those things. But man, Steve really nailed it with his monitors.
And the monitors, so Rockstars, the Durr monitors are the soffit mounted monitors way up in
Hmm.
the wall up high looking down.
And
So
the
that's
cedar wall.
the big sound. That's the turn it
Yes,
up speakers.
right.
And the console, of course, is a Maneve 8068, right?
Correct. It is.
What a what a beautiful console that is. So, is there a bit of a history to that board that you found to put in there?
Yeah, sure. So, again, at the beginning, it's like, what is the perfect console size and pedigree and sound that really celebrates what the church studio is all about. And we identified early on we wanted an 86, considered a 78, but that's just too big for the size of the control room. And lo and behold, we heard through the grapevine that Mr. Daniel Lenoir was selling his. And so Chad and I flew to, what town? It
wasn't down in New Orleans anymore. I think he's been out in LA,
he had moved it to California in his California home. And I went to his house and he had it set up and he had this beautiful window and it was so cool. And his engineer, Mark, showed us all about it. Of course, they had played with it. I don't know the right terminology, but the wiring. And of course, Daniel's known for really bridging that gap between, electronic music and analog. And so being the purist that I'd like to think that I am, just because I'm a collector of old things, and definitely Chad, we knew we wanted to get it back to factory settings. So we went on a multi-year. We kept it in California. Oh my!
Did you find somebody specific to rebuild the console?
He's a Neve prodigy. He does Neil stuff and did a lot of work in, again, the Broken Arrow studio that Neil Young had. And so we had it in in San Francisco is where we delivered it. And so it was there for almost 4 years, getting it back to factory. Yeah, getting it back to factory settings. And so then we got it installed and we are adding flying faders. That's scheduled, I think, the week after next. So we bought flying faders from Electric Lady Studio in New York. And so they've been serviced, software installed, and the computer for that. So Chad Haley and a guy that also worked on our project, Jim Gilmore, he helped us with our Fairchild that we have. We have a single channel Fairchild, and he's worked on the Neve. He's worked on our tape machines. And so he'll be flying in with Chad to do the install. So we'll be warming that up. I'll be capturing it on video, of course, because we love the beauty of those faders and put it on our YouTube channel.
So, Teresa, I have to just give you such props for being somebody who didn't come up in the control room, yet the level of stuff you've had to memorize to be able to even name drop all the gear on this is pretty impressive. So, beautifully done. Beautifully done.
Well, I wish I knew more. You mentioned early on in the show that we have an audio engineering program, and I thought, gosh, I really need to go through that. But when you start writing checks for things and learning the pedigree and the history, you're like, what? I remember when I first looked at the Neve, that was my first purchase, but it's a splurge, as you know, what they cost.
Right.
And I thought, this, as someone who's a garage sale thrift store person, I'm like, that looks like something I would find in a box at Goodwill. I mean, literally. And of course, I didn't say that to anyone, but I'm thinking that as like, how much? But once I purchased that Neve, there was no going back. But, you just learn what you're buying and what it's used for and why it's needed. And plus, there's so many brokers and people selling stuff and knockoffs and making up history. Aretha Franklin recorded on this, and we're going to jack the price up. So I wanted to learn as much as I could.
That's wild. Yeah. So in my studio here, I used to have a historic MCI console that had come out of Criteria Sound in Miami in the 70s. And it was the same board that did Hotel California and the Bee Gees records and
wow.
The Grease
Did it do the Eric
soundtrack.
Clapton Ocean Boulevard?
It did. Yes, it did. Yep, 461 Ocean Boulevard.
I love that album. Of course, that's all Tulsa musicians. Eric Clapton is probably the biggest example of what we call the Tulsa Sound, and lived in Tulsa for a little bit of time. And he hired the Shelter people, so Carl Radel, Dickie Sims, Jamie Oldacre, the drummer, and then, of course, Bob Marley's first American single was on Leon's record, and Denny Cordell was Leon's partner.
What was Bob's first American single?
Dopey Conqueror. Yeah.
That's great. That's a great connection, too, because Eric Clapton recorded I Shot the Sheriff on the MC.
Yeah, that's Tulsa. I mean, that's the Tulsa sound. And,
awesome.
Peter
We're kindred
Tosh.
spirits.
Yes, Peter Tosh that's so cool that you had that console. That's amazing. But in the book, you see Peter Tosh and, in the control room with the other guys that are all, Eric Clapton musicians, all from
So cool.
Tulsa. Yeah.
So cool. So cool. Hey, rock stars. Writing and recording your next great song just got a whole lot easier with Complete 15 from Native Instruments. This powerful toolkit gives you everything from deep sound design to instant musical ideas. Contact 8 introduces creative features like the new Chords tool, letting you generate and customize compelling chord progressions without needing to know music theory, making it perfect for songwriting. And the Phrases tool helps you find fresh melodic lines on the spot. With over 165 instruments and more than 150,000 sounds, Massive X, battery, and Guitar Rig 7 Pro, you've got everything you need to create in any genre. You can shape your ideas into real music fast. Whether you're sketching an idea or finishing a full production, Complete 15 keeps you in the creative flow from first note to final mix. Add your Complete Control keyboard or machine hardware to the mix for seamless integration and hands-on control. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Howdy, rock stars. We're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Teresa Knox, joining us from the church studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Teresa, are you ready to jam?
I am. I'm all ready.
All right. So let's see. You were just talking about Bob Marley recording there, and I wondered if there were any, funny anecdotes from that session or any stories that you had heard about him coming through.
Well, they had a lot of parties going on.
You
So
don't say.
my friend Walt Richmond took a lot of the photos when the Wailers were there. And so they would decorate very Caribbean, Jamaican. And, of course, I wasn't there during that time, so I don't have any firsthand accounts, but there's some really amazing photos. Not all of them, appeared in the book, but it looks like they definitely knew how to have a good time. And, teaching the Tulsa Sound musicians, how to play reggae. I know that
So
was
cool.
a challenge.
Yeah, I've gone through a little bit of that myself, trying to study and learn, like, how does reggae go together? I remember when you hear it as a
Yes.
kid, the first time, it sort of makes sense, but then when you break it down, you're like, wait, what does the bass do? What did the drums do? It's very,
Well, I Shot the Sheriff is so good.
yeah,
So, Eric really nailed it, and so did all the Tulsa musicians that played on that.
so cool. All right, and then let's see what else. There's lots of things I'd love to ask you about some of the artists that were playing there. There's some great photos in the book too about Leon Russell. Now, is a lot of this stuff from your collection? There's a 7-Eleven mug with a tribute to Leon Russell on it in one of the photos. It's just really funny.
Yeah, that was actually the first item I collected when I was 8 years old. So 7-Eleven in the 70s did a series of cups. They did 44 or 45 cups. And it was so cool that someone from my hometown ended up on a Slurpee cup. And those are really cool. So it was kind of an illustration. And then the backside of that cup has the bio. I have most of them. I have about 39, 40 of those in my collection. I have multiple Leon Russell ones. So if you ever come across those on eBay or somewhere, snag them because they were really hard to find. We had Derek Trucks here recently, and of course, his connection to the Allman Brothers. And so I wish I had two of those because I would have given him one. I'm still looking for one for him. And we've also had Kenny Loggins here, and there's a Loggins and Messina cup. And Kenny, just had no idea that his face was on a Slurpee cup. And he said, I don't think I got paid for that
That's funny.
when I showed it to him. Anyway, but yes, we have.
I feel like
we
this
have
1970s did a lot of cool stuff like that.
I know it, right? I love that. I wish someone would bring those back. So I don't think we have any 7-Elevens anymore like we used to. but we have a great chain called Quick Trip. I need to get with them and try to talk them into doing that.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. But there
Bring
is
it
a
back.
chapter on Leon Russell. And so we have a lot of his early childhood stuff through, some of his awards and clothing and music. But then I have an archive chapter, which I think has the 7-Eleven cups in it.
Well, what's so cool about what you're doing, what Motown has done, what Muscle Shoals has done, Memphis, Nashville has its tourism and its museums and its music, but I'm
RCA
trying to
Studio
think.
B.
Yeah, and RCA. Okay, right. So Nashville too. But I'd love to see, a world in which you can tour the entire United States, in a car, almost like a Route 66 tour, and just go from city to city,
Yes,
touring
we
all
have
the
so many
studios and the music
people.
history.
Yeah, we send people to Muscle Shoals and to Nashville and to Sun and to Stax, and so many of those come through here. They have the T-shirts on, and they are on a studio tour. And so we
Wow.
love being in that cohort of these legendary legacy studios. So it really is an honor. And Grammy put us in the top 10 studios to see in America, and we were shocked to be on that list, and that was really cool.
That's awesome. Now, one of the photos in the book too is a big group of people called the Leon Lifers.
Yes.
Are you a Leon Lifer, and can you tell us about that? That was really funny to see.
Well, I feel like I'm a Leon lifer now, but honestly, I wasn't aware of this group. But these are Leon Russell super fans, and they are lifelong fans. They would follow him from city to city. They would have a birthday bash every April in celebration of Leon Russell. He was very close to them. He would do shout outs to them. He would join them for potlucks, after the show. So he had a really close relationship with them. And when I first acquired the studio, of course, I told you I started posting on social media. And then Leon passed away about 2 months after I closed on the building. And, early on, the lifers were a little bit, you got to kind of prove yourself to get in their circle, I think. But, they would ask me questions like, how many shows have you seen? And have you met Leon? And, grilling me on some things. And then their leader was a really great guy by the name of Johnny Blues and Johnny McDonald. And so he has since passed away, but he was really kind and reached out. But when Leon passed away, there was kind of this paradigm shift. And I felt like the studio it was kind of developing its own persona. And that's really how we've presented the branding. There's no, I or anything in our post. And so we kind of became this surrogate Leon for them. And so we started hosting them, even though we were under renovation for many years. And, you couldn't have a Leon Russell birthday bash because Leon, did that. And then, we had a shindig the first year, and they came from all over their country to Tulsa to the studio. But it has evolved to what we know now as Carney Fest. And Carney was that great third studio album of Leon Russell that came out in 1972. It has Tightrope on it, probably his biggest hit, in This Masquerade. And so we wanted to not make it the Leon Russell Festival, but we wanted to, pay tribute to Leon, because there would be no church studio. There would be nothing of what we do today without him. And so this year will be our 4th annual Carney Fest. So we blocked the street off in front of us, and it's very 70s. We have, stilt walker. We have jugglers. We have music all day. So artists that have recorded with us this past year. This year, our headliner is Robert Randolph, who is a lot of fun, brings a lot of energy to the stage. Mike Campbell.
Right, from the Heartbreakers.
Yes. So Mike and Tom and Benmont, both Mike and Benmont have been here. Of course, they got their start right here in Tulsa. They're probably
That's
the
what
biggest.
I wanted to ask you. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. They're probably the the most famous, I would say, band that came out of, they're not from Tulsa, but they recorded here, they stopped here, and then they signed to Shelter Records.
Right.
So,
Was that Tom Petty's first signing was
yeah,
with
absolutely.
Shelter with
Yeah,
Leon. Wow.
and the band was called Mudcrutch, and then it evolved to be, during their time with Shelter, to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And
Wow.
so when we had Mike here, he just came out with this great book about, an autobiography. And, after he spent time here, he tweaked his Shelter Records Tulsa chapter a little bit because it triggered memories. If you have time, I have an interview with Mike on our YouTube channel, but talks about Leon and the church. And it was such an amazing experience spending time with him. We walked through the studio and he was kind of sharing memories. And what was so cool is, he was talking to me on this side and telling me what it was like being at the studio, during that mid-'70s time period. And then we had Sirius XM Tom Petty radio, and he was on an interview on this side. And I was like, this is the best day of my life. I mean, it was really amazing. But yeah, the Leon Lifers are these super fans, and they are just so loyal to us, and they uplift us, they support us, and they're just a great group of music fans that idolize Leon. And so we have that in common.
So I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share because you sent over a playlist of music too, and I thought I'd pull that up. So these are are these all records that might have been recorded right there at the church?
Yeah, definitely. I put that together with my assistant Annabelle, and gosh, there's 1,000 songs we could put on this playlist.
Yeah.
And so just some of our favorites of Leon and JJ.
So much good stuff, rock stars.
Yes,
I mean, it's like
some
Leon,
of yes.
Stranger in a Strange Land, Outstanding by the Gap Band. Am I That Easy? I have to say some of this stuff out loud, too, for the audio listeners. Ballad of Spider John, Willis Allen Ramsey, Magnolia, J.J. Cale. And, of course, Tulsa Time.
I know, that's such a great song.
Yeah.
And what's funny is not the Eric version, but, Don Williams cut that song, and our senior engineer, Gary Laney, that was his first hit, was recording Don Williams. And of course, 6 months later, Eric Clapton cut it with the Tulsa musicians.
Yeah.
Really paying tribute to his time in Tulsa. So we really, really love that. And then we recorded a version with some local musicians, John Fulbright and Paul Benjamin. And so we use that background music for some of our videos and other things.
So cool.
Phoebe Snow's on there. That's so great.
And Freddie King.
Oh my gosh, we love Freddie. Yes. So my friend Don Nix, who passed away this past year, unfortunately, but he wrote the song Going Down. And so many people have cut that song. But Freddie King was a Shelter Records artist, and so was Don Nix, who wrote the song. But I love that.
Now, of course, as I go down here, this is what I really wanted to show off too. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. We've got American Girl and Breakdown. Now, were those two songs recorded at the studio there?
They weren't. They did a lot of songs here, but they kind of pieced together Breakdown here in the studio because Dwight Twilley, was really involved with that riff on Breakdown. And there's a great video of Mike Campbell talking about that song. But, it came out of their signing to Shelter Records and what was happening here. So it's directly related to us.
And then just some other quick mentions, rock stars, Kansas, The National, South Hall, Dropkick
Kansas
Murphys.
recorded. Yes, our first full album project was the Dropkick Murphys.
Oh, cool.
Our very first client was Tommy Emmanuel, and so I should have put him on there. He was so great since the Renovation. But the Dropkick Murphys, The National recorded with us. We've had We've had so many. Taj Mahal in February
Yeah.
received a Grammy for the Best Blues Album, which was recorded with us. And yeah,
Super fun.
it's been a fun ride.
Hey, rock stars, when it's time to finish your music, Isotope Ozone 12 gives you the powerful new tools to master with confidence. The new bass control helps you balance your low-end EQ, sustain, and punch so that your tracks translate everywhere. Unlimiter restores clarity and impact to overcompressed mixes, and Stem EQ lets you rebalance vocals, drums, and bass using only the stereo mix file. When it's time to push loudness, Ozone's new IRC5 Maximizer delivers clean and powerful competitive masters that stay open and musical. And with an updated mastering assistant that guides, not decides, you can move faster, make better decisions, and stay fully in control from start to finish. Go to isotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. So other stuff, fun stuff I started learning about Leon Russell. I guess he had been a player on many records in the LA scene. Is that right? And was he actually part of the Wrecking Crew partly as well? I think he was playing along
definitely.
with them, right?
Leon was a huge part of the Wrecking Crew. He's not only featured in the film, but we know that he was on hundreds and hundreds of recordings. If you ever get a chance to see his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you hear Elton John just listing off all of the albums that he recorded on, from
Wow.
being part of the Tijuana Brass to Badfinger to Frank Sinatra to dun, 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 Beach Boys, him playing. And again, he was on so many albums. I love listening to Cher talk about, Leon Russell during the Wrecking Crew years. And of course, Glenn Campbell was a part of that as well. And he and Glenn were such good friends. It was actually Ricky Nelson that introduced Leon to Glenn Campbell. And we have a Ricky Nelson microphone that we bought from Gunnar Nelson. So the twins, Gunnar and Matthew Nelson, and Gunnar came here, and we bought our third Neumann M49. We wanted 3 because we wanted to use the M49s for a Decatree, which we use quite often,
cool.
that we set up in the studio. But we have some great photos of Leon and Glenn Campbell. But it's kind of like the Tulsa Sound, that verbiage. I don't think those in the Wrecking Crew called themselves the Wrecking Crew, and probably get kind of irritated to hear that terminology. But for us fans, we need like a name. And that's how it is, with what we call the Tulsa Sound. The guys that are still around, they just like, oh, please, what is the Tulsa Sound? And it's like, well, when I brag about all the musicians from my hometown, I have to have a name.
Yeah.
And so that's what we call it. And I really consider it this brotherhood, sisterhood, this camaraderie versus a specific genre. As you pointed out, the funk of the Gap Band, or the easy sound of J.J. Cale, to the honky tonk, whatever, of Leon.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but Leon has an incredible history, but he really propelled to stardom when he and Denny Cordell got together, and they threw together very quickly Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour for Joe Cocker. Started working on that in late 1969. They went on tour in 1970, but that put Leon Russell on center stage. And it's like, wow, this guy is a superstar. And what he did was just so incredible with this crazy carnival. I mean, there's so many people, 4 drummers, all of those background singers. And then, one of the photographers, brought her dog, his girlfriend at the time brought her child, and other people brought their children. And I mean, it was just kind of this freak show of all these things happening. He had just broken up with Rita Coolidge. So I had an opportunity to interview Rita about that tour, and Carla Brown, and Claudia Lanier. I've had an opportunity to interview a lot of people about that time period, and Jim Keltner on drums, and also from Tulsa, Chuck Blackwell. Then you had Jim Gordon, who was a very violent person. killed his mother and hurt Rita. And I mean, there was just so much
Wow.
drama and scandal going on, and Joe just plugging away. Of course, he's wearing that iconic Shelter Records t-shirt, and that really was the beginning of Shelter Records. Denny Cordell, this British producer, known, had an incredible history, got together with Leon, and it's like they were just such a perfect combo to start this new innovative record label. Unfortunately, it was short-lived, but they really did that on the road with Mad Dogs and Englishmen. And then Leon followed that up with the Concert for Bangladesh with George Harrison. And so that came out in 1971, and that was the first, social concert of a supergroup. This
Yeah.
is, pre-Woolberries or We Are the World. And, you had
Yeah.
Eric Clapton, you had Bob Dylan, you had Badfinger, you had George Harrison, you had, Leon Russell, and you had, again, Tulsa musicians, on the forefront. And Ravi Shankar, of course, Norah Jones's father. So
So
pretty incredible.
Ravi was joining the Mad Dogs as well, or
No,
that's
no,
following the
he
Mad
followed it
Dogs?
up. Yeah, it came, a year
So the
later in
Mad Dogs was a
71.
rather large band on stage. That's how you were describing it?
Yes, it was huge, and, it's in the news a lot right now because Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi, they did a reboot of that and did a film, Learning to Live Together, and so that's out right now if you're a fan of the Tedeschi Trucks band. And they were in Tulsa when they started the tour and came to the studio, and we recorded them recently. They've been with us twice, but just Google the Mad Dogs. I think it's still on YouTube for a few more days. But see the original film and then see the Learning to Live Together. It's just fantastic.
Super cool. Okay, great. I'll do that. Now, another little tidbit about Leon's time in Los Angeles is it sounds like he might have played on Pet Sounds for Brian Wilson as well as part
Oh,
of those guys.
absolutely. Yeah. No,
What
it
a
was during
great
that.
credit in there.
Yeah, no, it's his credits are massive, and we're really proud of that.
And so, talk more about Elton John's connection to Leon. So they had played together and made records together as well.
Yeah, sort of. They met in 1970 at uh, Fillmore East, and Leon, it's featured in Elton's film that came out. Leon Russell is in the audience.
Yeah.
So Leon went backstage and they were able to do some things together in that early 70s time period. And then, they went their own way. But to hear Elton discuss Leon being his mentor and who he looks up to, and, he was on Jimmy Fallon this earlier in the year, and Jimmy asked him, if there was a song you wish you would have written, what would it be? And he said, Leon Russell's the song for you, and started singing. And so that was really cool. But they reconnected in 2010 for the Union album. And our good friend T-Bone Burnett produced that. And it's such a great album. And they went on tour together. There was a lot of talk with Leon signing to Rocket Man Records at that time. But Leon was just at a time, he loved connecting with Leon or with Elton. And again, when you see John Mayer and Leon performing a song for you at the induction at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he kind of loses his composure, but he had so much love for Elton and Elton for him. So it really is a beautiful friendship.
What a cool thing. And again, I love your ability to be on the spot, to both be, knowledgeable about all the studio stuff, but also a musical historian at the same time as an entrepreneur and somebody who can assemble this whole collection of studio, tourism,
Thank you.
music school. We haven't really talked about the music school. Would you like to talk a little bit about that? What did you create? What are you guys creating there? What is the vision for the music school? Or the recording school, I guess. Really.
Yeah, it really, again, like the studio wasn't really my intention. I come from the school business, so I started a vocational school in my early 20s. And I believe in the power of career and technical education from a workforce development, but just to having a job you can be proud of to get you out of poverty, addiction, abuse. And so I did that for many, many, many years, and I stepped away about a decade ago. Always be the founder, but I stepped down as CEO, and it has a new president. Anyway, so when I was building the studio and I started like, okay, we're going to need staff to run the studio and people that really know this amazing gear that this collection that we've put together. And I found that there was a shortage of audio engineers, surprisingly. And so I, again, never thought I'd start another school, but you have to be most states, I think all 50 states, you have to be licensed by your state to operate a post-secondary institution. Created a catalog, enrollment agreement, a curriculum, and we're licensed by the Oklahoma Board of Private Vocational Schools. It's a hybrid
Amazing.
program in the sense that the online portion is online, mostly Berkeley School of Music curriculum that we've repurposed. And then we've identified 100 core competencies that an engineer needs to be successful in the workplace. And so it's very, very hands-on. We take 6 students at a time. And the students are incredible. They do so much work for us. I mean, from concierge, private butler services, to errands, to running sound, to assisting, to miking things up. We are even getting students with bachelor's degrees because our program is designed to be from 6 months to a year, depending on if you already work. It's a very family-friendly schedule. But we're getting students from other institutions that didn't learn a lot from a hands-on perspective.
That's what I was going to ask, are you finding students are coming from the local area, or are they coming across the country to join you guys?
Mostly it's been local. We've had some, inquiries from out of state. But again, it's a very hands-on program. We've had different types of students. Our very first enrollee is an attorney, and he wanted to get an entertainment law. And now he's doing audio engineering on the side in addition to his law practice. And then we've had stage performers that are more classically trained performers that want to do their own recording. And then we have some that are working in local clubs because there's a live sound component to the curriculum.
Yep.
But, and then we've
Smart.
hired two that are on staff. So I feel like we get to pick the best of the best, through the program. But we want to make sure that analog, not only, we have a tech room with soldering machines and other things. We want to make sure that it doesn't become just so novelty that only a few people can work on this gear. So that's a little bit of the curriculum, being able to service, work on the analog gear and modern recording. I mean, obviously we usually work in the box and we're Pro Tools, but, we just want to make sure that the workforce, that we are doing our part to feeding the workforce in audio engineering when things are becoming
smart. It's like it's a way to think about vertically integrating a business model too, where it's like, you're actually training from the very ground up.
Yes.
Everybody who knows how to keep it going, which is really cool. Now, when you listed the 100 core competency things, were there any that really stood out to you that you think are worth sharing for those of us who are really focused on the engineering? Anything
Well,
that
really,
just struck you?
something to me that's missing, and it's not very technical, so you may not like this answer, but really it's the soft skills. Sometimes, you have a band coming in or loading in. It's like, hi, my name is Teresa. I'm going to be assisting in your session today and, giving them an orientation of the room. This is the mic closet. These are your private restrooms. This is our hospitality card. If you don't see the oat milk that you want on there, let us know and we'll get that for you. And so I think that is kind of a missing art because, it's like welding was one of the programs I had at my other school. And so you working alone that you kind of forget some of those things. And I've seen that a lot with sound engineers because you work solo so often. And so we want to make sure that we are offering 5-star hotel service. I mean, that's really, really important. So, again, setting them up for success and what type of help do they need, loading in the gear and that sort of thing. But I think, everyone has different opinion on miking up the piano or miking up the drum kit, or are you going to bring in the gobos or using the isolation rooms? Like, how do you make those calls? It's very, very, very subjective. In a lot of our sessions, we have new musicians that have never recorded. So they're 100% depending on us. They don't have a producer. And so it's whatever our team thinks is best. But we also get those sessions, especially with like record label projects, where we are just there to serve the producer and the engineer.
Yeah.
And so I love those because they look at our room from a very, very, very fresh perspective.
Are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing, working with professional grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848.
And I'm not saying our guys always do the same thing, but when you kind of get used to a room, you're like, oh, this is the best mic. And, we had Trina Shoemaker here who
she's great. She was on the podcast recently.
Oh my gosh, I love her. Well, she booked a whole day for pre-production and and she had like mapped everything out. I think it was an AutoCAD. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this woman. And so she just really, really prepared. And then when the band arrived, let's see, that was the Mountain Goats, which they are fantastic. They hit the ground running. She knew exactly where everyone was going to go. And I thought that was such a good learning opportunity for our staff to see this very, very different and fresh perspective. And, some, traveling engineers, producers, they already know which mic. They review our gear list in great detail. And they know that, their singer that they want this Telefunken ELAM 251 for the vocal mic. But some of them don't. So I loved, taking in consideration our room size, the ceiling height, the acoustics, the ISO. And then it's like, okay, let's line up a dozen mics and see which one. I think this one's going to be the best, but let's test it. Real teaching the students to think about the pre-production aspect of things. Yeah. And otherwise, bands will be using valuable studio time for rehearsing and setting up and fumbling. And, I just want to be really prepared so they can hit the ground running.
I think that's smart. And even one of the 2-page spreads in the book is, I'd show it, but I'll have to hunt through 400 pages to find it right now. It's just beautiful pictures of all the microphones, right down to RE20s and, the Coles 4038. And I saw there was a Soyuz mic in there, a small diaphragm. But
yes.
That's
not
something
all
that
of them,
I think
but a lot of them.
Yeah, that would be a really cool thing to do for your studio. I think for any of our studios. I did this for my YouTube channel. I was actually doing a mic review of a variety of Jay-Z microphones at one point because I had quite a collection, so I could actually do a 7 mic comparison. And it was funny because I go back to that video myself and I review it when I'm deciding, well, which one do I want to use on the acoustic guitar today, And I'll go back and look at, and I'll hear it, and I remember I like the sound of that. So you guys could do that, and I suppose anybody with the studio, it'd probably be a smart thing to do is to just start shooting videos.
Absolutely.
Mic shootouts.
I want to do more of that, even comparing plugins to the real deal. A plugin for EMT plate reverb, or we have 2 EMT 140s in the studio. But it's funny about the mic. So when I the book, Sanctuary of Sound, that we're talking about today, of course, we're a recording studio, so I have to do an audio version. It's not out yet. It will be out before the end of the year.
That was a question.
And I have a companion album coming out with it. But I thought, okay, I want to take a couple of photos. I want the the best, what I think is the best mic. So, I chose the Neumann U47. We have this pristine,
Nice.
beautiful U47. And it's like, the guys were like, can you swallow? And I mean, because the saliva and it was just picked up everything. And then we went down, I think we went to U87 or 67. And I was like, what is the cheapest, crappiest microphone that we have? And all of our mics are so amazing because when you're talking, it's so hard. And that's where I really got a whole new respect for people. You're vulnerable, and then the engineers can hear every single thing.
Oh,
And of
yeah.
course, they're probably more comfortable with me telling me that, you pronounced that wrong or you did. I mean, it was so funny. Like, I was so humbled by that experience. And now just editing is so painful. Like, I will never be able to listen. I can't listen to myself anyway. I probably won't even listen to this. It's like microphones are, yes. I mean, picking the right mic is everything.
Well, to clarify even further, you were doing the audio book version of The Sanctuary of Sound, the book. And so typically for an audiobook, it's a very high-end condenser mic in a really quiet space. And to your point, every little detail is being heard. And partly that's because our reading voice is much more docile than a singing voice. When a singing voice is blasting loud, that means the quiet sounds are much relatively lower in volume. But on a reading voice, every little detail is right there. And,
Yes.
as you're expressing, it's like having the recording engineer live inside your body slightly, while you're
Yes.
trying to be vulnerable and perform something and read something. And, just joking around, but even me reading the intro for our podcast today, hopefully I will have edited that out, but and I know that I stumbled on one sentence in there. So there's a lot of that in
It's so hard.
reading an audiobook. There's a lot of
It is.
restarts and do-overs
And
and things like that.
some of the playbacks are like, oh my God, I sound sedated. It sounds like I'm on Xanax or something. It's so bad. And then when I, want to be, because I talk with my hands. I'm a little more animated on my regular, normal speaking. And then, it's like, oh, that's too much. It's, like you want to be authentic. And so I don't know. I kind of want to redo the whole thing over again, but there's no way in hell I would ever do that. Yeah, right.
For the next book or for your podcast, which you're already starting, which is interviewing all the people around the studio.
I know.
That's cool.
I should have a podcast.
Okay, so let's see. One of the things I thought I'd ask you too, well, I actually have a couple of questions from our audience, actually. So I reached out to people, got a few people responding, just saying, hey, what do you want to know about Leon Russell? And the first one comes in from Brad, and he said, maybe ask who did Leon's hair. So you can respond to these any way you choose.
I love that. I think Leon did his own hair. Of course, he grayed so early in his 30s, early 30s, he turned gray. But I think he's a trailblazer in long-haired music. He's one of the first artists to have that long hair. And one of his most iconic photos, he's wearing a T-shirt that says Gil's Barbershop. And everyone's like, yeah, right. We know you never stepped foot in that barbershop. Which was a barbershop in Los Angeles. But he did his own hair, pretty sure.
And this is just me riffing on that, hearing you talk about living in LA, and I'm thinking about him living in Tulsa. What about where he lived in Tulsa? And, did he have some favorite places that he would frequent in Tulsa?
Yeah, so, I mean, he was a top recording and performing artist in 72 when he came back to his hometown of Tulsa. And he bought a lot of property, but his main residence was this beautiful mansion in this historic neighborhood built by the oil barons called Maple Ridge. And he put a studio in the basement of that as well. But he drove a Rolls Royce. And so, sightings of him in town was a really, really big deal when he was here from 72 to 76. So he was a big hit with the locals.
And so he had seen some success in LA before coming back to Tulsa. That sounds like coming back to your hometown on the heels of success.
Yeah, he was at the top of his game in 72. You think of Mad Dogs and Englishmen, 70, Concert for Bangladesh, 71. The Carney album came out in 72, and he was flying high. But I think, he must have been tired of what was happening in LA. Again, disruption like what we see today was happening in the music industry. And I think he wanted to pay it forward with the local musicians as well. And he had this whole vision for what he wanted to do for Shelter Records.
And then he had the church for not that long, I guess 4 years, really? Is that what you're saying is with Shelter Records?
Yeah, so that's the life of Shelter Records here in Tulsa. He owned it technically until 1980, but he had already left, went back to LA and then went to Nashville. He had his alter ego, Hank Wilson, that he was doing. He had married another Shelter artist, Mary McCreary, and they performed on first season of Saturday Night Live. That people will remember that because that was that great Belushi skit where he performed as Joe Cocker. If you guys remember that, but
I
Leon
totally remember John doing that.
Leon was a musical guest on that episode, but I don't think Tulsa was quite ready for, again, that rock music. There was a lot happening in our city with Oral Roberts University and the Mabee Center, Elvis coming here, Jim Halsey. So all these, the Judds, all these musicians were being signed to Halsey's agency. And I think, and he and his partner, there was trouble. And so the label kind of imploded. And so, the studio was taken over by someone else. And then
what did they say? The flame, the candle that burns brightest burns shortest.
Yes. And it's so unfortunate because you think about where that label would be today. It was very entrepreneurial. It was so cool what they were doing. And so I love looking at their marketing assets and kind of the strategy they were deploying at the time, which was very, very innovative. And you think of what Herb Albert was doing and all of the others that were kind of emerging, out of the 70s.
And now you went to the university as well. Is that right?
I went back later and I got an MBA, and I had already been in business for many years, but wanted to learn a little bit more.
So I've only heard through the grapevine that the university is kind of really wild, quite a place in terms of
it's incredible. It's kind of
space age or something, right?
Yes, it's inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright. His protege designed it.
Amazing.
And Oral was very innovative at the time. And of course, we're, the Bible Belt here. People come from all over the world to attend the university there. And I didn't grow up in a Christian environment, but later discovered his autobiography. And he started a school with a lot of challenges. And I really resonated with that story because, I barely graduated high school. And to think that I owned a college was pretty crazy. So I really related to that story and all the obstacles that came with that and being ridiculed. And so I knew if I ever went back to school to get a graduate degree that I wanted to go to Oral Roberts University to, it was, again, a lot of people will make fun of Oral and what he did, but what he did was really trailblazing. And, even, John Lennon had an affinity for him and wrote him a letter before his death. And that's in the archive at Oral Roberts University. And it's a really beautiful story.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins and Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Okay, so the next question, which is probably good timing as we talked about Leon coming to Tulsa and then leaving. Leonardo asks, when is he coming back? So you can answer that. I would say he's coming. I'd say Leon is back through you in the church studio, and helping to create a space there.
And you said Leon?
No, Leonardo was the person who asked. Yeah, his
Leonardo
question was
DiCaprio?
No, it was just Leonardo was who responded in my my audience.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Leonardo DiCaprio was here in town. So
was he? Well, you can tell us about that too. Why not?
Well,
I mean, I think it was a comedy question that he was asking.
Yes, it was. Okay, I'm sorry. I totally missed that. I was like, wow.
What was Leonardo DiCaprio coming back?
He was here in Robert De Niro for 6 months, filming Killers of the Flower Moon, which was the Oscar-nominated film about the Osage tribe. And so, anyway, it was fun to have him here in town.
All right, so this one comes in from Kevin, and I don't know if you would know anything about this, but Kevin asked, because I know Kevin's a big surf fan, he said, what about playing on the Ventures in Space album? If memory serves correctly, it was the same day that Kennedy was assassinated. I guess that would have been way before coming back to Tulsa. And this is a question about Leon, of course. Are you familiar with him having played on a Ventures album by any chance?
I wouldn't be surprised. It's not ringing a bell to me right now. It definitely was during that Wrecking Crew time period when literally played on hundreds of albums.
Okay, awesome. Well, then let me ask a few last questions for you about putting the whole studio together. I guess you talked about the technical and structural stuff, but one of the thoughts was just, acoustics, architecture, and preservation, and how that actually shapes recordings today. What thoughts do you have on that topic? Anything in particular?
Well, the whole project was an exciting challenge because, this was a church. It was a house of worship in 1915 through 1972. And how do you honor that original architecture, yet it needs to emulate the way Leon had it in the 70s. And so that's what qualified us to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places, is what happened during those magical years of 72 to 76. So you have that early turn of the century architecture with that 70s look and feel, but sounding really good because the building was so dilapidated. It needed new plumbing. Everything structure. We have a whole new foundation. We had to shore the building up because it was imploding. It was, decomposing from the inside out. So, but with all of the wood species and the history and the legacy of the building, it's like you just know it was the sanctuary of sound. And so you knew it was going to sound good, but getting that technical expertise to make sure. And that's why we had kind of this slow opening, because we had a lot of musicians test it, because we didn't want to say, oh, this quote unquote world-class recording studio is open. And there was just so many issues. And we ran into problems like electrical pollution in the lines, to HVAC infiltrating, to RF, that coming through the microphones. And so, but again, we had a lot of challenges, and there are some things that were in contradiction with each other. So National Park Service, they had a keen interest on the preservation, and they wanted things like, they wanted us to keep the acoustic panels that we discovered on the walls. Well, they were full of mold. They were disintegrating. They were not functional, but they were original to the building. Well, we can't keep those up because they're not functional. They don't even sound good anymore. We can't repurpose them or repair them. So we have to replace them with something that looks similar to them. But really, the National Park Service, it was a nightmare. from the Oklahoma Preservation Office, and we ended up spending significantly more money than what we should have based upon, a few opinions of a few people that came into town to check on what we were doing. And so we didn't even get a tax credit, even
Wow.
going through all of that. So, I mean, it was an exciting, fun project, but from a technical and a realistic and a historical perspective, they were often at odds with each other.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of challenges you had to get
We did.
past. So let me see here. How about this? What about why does saving legacy spaces like that? Why does that matter for the future of music production? And how does that matter?
Well, I think, again, we don't want to live in the past. And as you know, what got us here won't get you there. But, paying tribute to these people that did things without the internet, without digital, I mean, it's just incredible. And, you look at the pure musicianship of what they did. And even talking with someone like Roger Lynn, who invented the drum machine, and he gives credit to Leon Russell and the work. He moved to Tulsa and was Leon's guitarist, and he attributes inspiration from Jamie Oldacre and Jim Keltner and David Teagarden and Chuck Blackwell, all the amazing drummers that came out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. But what they did, and you think about how the drum machine and drum beats and, how that's used today. Look what Prince did to the Lynn drum machine. I mean, he took it to a whole new level. I mean, just very, very, very innovative. So, being inspired by that innovate, and it's, I don't know, it makes things make sense today. And when you look at the stories of the early churchgoers to the early musicians in Leon Russell's circle, the shelter people, knowing their stories, connects us to them, and it makes what we do really matter. I mean, this is a living, breathing archive, the building itself,
Yeah.
and it's important to save, and it's important to connect with those past stories to make new stories, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's so great. I think it's wonderful what you're doing. Well, I do have one closing question for you, Teresa. This one is hypothetical, and I ask it of all our guests on the show. And you get to take the Wayback Studio machine and you go back in time and you find young Teresa and you say, listen, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. I know your young self would have said, studio? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But
Right.
if you could just go back and give yourself advice, having gone through this whole process, a fan of music, a collector of the memorabilia, and then an interest in entrepreneurship, and then, building and bringing back an iconic studio, and then also learning about the whole recording process and the studio process through that yourself. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
I think the best advice I would give myself is to immediately identify my end goal, what the end prize is, and not be distracted by all of the external opinions and obstacles that other people brought to the table.
Yeah.
And so I'm a people pleaser by nature, and I was trying to satisfy. There's so many stakeholders in what we do, the citizens of our city. We have, city government, county, state, people on a federal level. You have, family members of musicians that came through here. Everyone has an opinion, and I think it's great because there's wisdom in crowds. It's good to get a consensus because I think that's how we get to optimum. But some people have such a strong opinion because they know everything about the studio, right?
The
They're
vocal minority.
experts. Yes, they know, and they're just so insistent, and so you don't want to hurt their feelings or that sort of thing. But one, I spent extra money because of that. And number two, there are hurt feelings no matter what. So again, what we said earlier, begin with the end in mind. That's your mission, and write that mission statement. Well, your mission is your purpose, right? It's your reason for existence. And I'm usually like that, but passion projects are a little bit different than a very strategic business plan, and fine tuning that a little bit more versus, just letting it go at its own
Yeah.
accord. I think that's what I would tell myself, to say a little bit more strategic and on target.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's great advice. And I think it's great for all of us to hear that from you. And I like the way you differentiate a little bit between, a business target that might be very specific and in some ways we can remove ourselves emotionally from it. But in a passion project, which we are all in through music and through our studios, being able to figure out how can we identify what that goal is and what that target is so that we can really stay on point, because it's very wise to remind us that there are a million things that will pull you off track
But,
in the
we don't
process.
want to lose that passion or gut and intuition, and you have to be
Yeah.
somewhat open to the external environment because you want to be able to pivot quickly.
Yeah.
You also need to know when to cut your losses, when it's like, okay, I've gone, pride gets in the way. Sometimes you go so far on something that you just have your heart set on, but you got to know when to call it quits on a direction that you're going. And that's hard to do.
Right. What is that called? The sunk cost
Yes.
syndrome or something like that,
Yes.
right? Where it's like you won't let go because you've already invested in something.
Yes. You're
But
right
sometimes
about
you just
that.
have to.
Yep.
Well, Teresa, thank you so much for coming and joining us on the podcast. What an amazing story, and what an
Thank you.
inspiration to meet you. And thank you for keeping music alive and introducing us to a whole genre, a whole region, a whole area, a whole thriving community. Let the
Thank
rock
you.
stars know how can they find out more about you, about the studio. What should they be following? I believe you have some events that happen now, but I'm imagining there's going to be more reasons to come to Tulsa and visit the studio. So what should everybody know about that?
I think the best thing is to go to our website, thechurchstudio.com, and sign up for our newsletter. We won't bombard you, but we keep you updated on our programming and other activities going on. And we also share photos of people in the studio. If you like YouTube, which I absolutely love, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We put out shorts and videos and interviews and musical performances, both from the past and current. So that's a way to get a hold of us. I'd love for your listeners to maybe consider buying the book for the holidays. 100% of the sales go to support our artist grant program, the Sanctuary of Sound. You can go to the shop tab on the Church Studios website, or if you want to learn more about my bio, I have a tab for the book on there as well. And
Very
that's
cool. And that sounds like
schoolofhardknocks.com.
it's also a great item to bring home from your trip to Tulsa to visit the studio in person.
Yes,
That's a
absolutely.
great bit of a memento of your trip. So, Teresa, thank you so
Yes.
much for joining us.
Thank
Rockstars,
you.
we will have links to all of this in the show notes as well, including the music and the playlist, the book, the studio, so that you can go check all of this out, and the YouTube channel. And if you enjoyed this, please remember to subscribe to our channel so that you get more interviews with incredible folks like Teresa here, and like the video, because that's actually going to help the algorithm here at YouTube or wherever we are in the future to propel forward and make sure that more people get to learn about this. And then, Teresa, do you have any questions for the rock stars that you'd like them to answer or drop into the comments? Anything that comes to mind for you?
Let's see. I'm always interested to know if people can hear the difference of where recordings happen, and if they can differentiate now with all these hits coming out generated by AI, if they can tell, if it's a home studio, professional studio, on someone's phone, or AI generated. I'm just really curious about that.
That is a killer question. You are now hired for asking all the right questions on my channel from here on, Teresa. Thank you. I love that. Rockstars, let us know. Can you tell the difference? Can you tell the difference between playing a great vinyl record and listening to, a digital MP3 on Spotify, for example? Can you tell the difference between AI music and an original great recording and a real performance? I think that's a core question. Well, thank you, Teresa. It's wonderful to meet you, and I look forward to visiting the studio myself and meeting you in person.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our fantastic sponsors who make this episode possible. Isotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Spectra 1964, Grace Design, and Picker. Check out the Spectra 1964 website for factory direct budget-saving prices on the STX 600, 100, 100D, and BBDI Direct Box. Check out my studio profile on the Picker app on iPhone or Android, and remember to take advantage of our special coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug-in purchase at isotope.com or nativeinstruments.com. And don't forget, you can start mixing right now with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in the show notes below. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, because it's a great way to help support this show. And I'd also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Daria Tupesis. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.